On the mess deck of the Prince of Wales, there were strange figures mingled with the ratings there. Workmen in civilian clothes, some in overalls, others more pretentious. Heralded by a pipe, the commander came in on his nightly round, looking keenly about him. "You men comfortable all right?" he asked one of the party. "No, we're not," said one of the workmen, still seated. "We don't like sleeping in hammocks, and we don't like the food. We don't like being taken away like this without our consent. What our union will say when we get home. I expect you'll get double time and danger money," said the commander. "Oh, it isn't the union I'm thinking about, sir," said another, less belligerent. "It's my wife. I can just guess what she thinks I'm up to. She'll be all the more pleased when she hears you haven't been up to," said the commander. Another of the civilian workers was obviously thinking about something else. "You feel that, sir?" he asked. "Listen, we're increasing speed. Feel that vibration? Must be 27 knots, I should think. Maybe 28. No, 27. You know these engines better than I do," said the commander. "I helped to build them, and I've been helping to run them for the last 3 days. I ought to know them. What are we putting on speed for, in the middle of the night like this?" "Well, I may as well tell you now," the commander said. "It will be on the loudspeaker in a minute. Bismarck's been spotted. She's not far ahead of us, and we fight her in the morning." "Fight her, sir? But those turbines—" "You'll have to help to keep them turning," said the commander. The first speaker was on his feet. His grievance is no longer apparent. "We're going to fight, aren't we?" he said. "That shell ringing white turret. I've never been satisfied with it. I'd like to see what I can do. Can I go up there, sir?" "I don't doubt you'll be welcome. Good luck with it." In the background, 2 more civilian workers were exchanging comments. "Look at this." "Here it is, in black and white. Henry J. Jones, non-combatant. Same for you. Look, non-combatant. That's to cover us if we're taken prisoner. Then they won't shoot us as spies. They'll put us into a civilian prison instead of a military one." "But how can they take us prisoners?" "If they pick us up after this ship's sunk, we might live long enough if the water's not too cold. But they can't fight with us on board. It's illegal." "Ask the captain to put you ashore then," said the first speaker. "I'm going up to White Turret." Any further words of his were drowned in the blare of the loudspeakers calling the men to action stations. On the bridge of the Bismarck, the Admiral Lutyens and Captain Lindemann were standing looking into the grey mist where the first light of dawn was beginning to show. The radio officer was reporting to them. "The British cruiser has been sending out messages every 15 minutes, regularly all through the night, sir." "Can you guess what they are?" "I can be quite sure, sir. They are position and course reports." "We could be sure of that in any case," said Lutyens to Lindemann. "What else?" "I think I can identify her by her call sign, sir. She's the Suffolk. 8-inch gun cruiser, 10,000 tons, launched 1926. Last known Captain Ellis," said one of the staff, flipping through a reference book. "Thank you, but the details hardly matter. Anything else?" "British Admiralty has been sending messages all through the night, sir. Some of them clearly addressed to ships, other ships besides the Suffolk, sir." "No indication of which ships or where?" "I regret not, sir." "Not a word from anything at sea?" "Not a word, sir. Thank you." As the radio officer saluted and turned away, Lutyens addressed Lindemann. "That's radio silence enforced as it ought to be enforced. We could wish the British weren't so careful. But now we say goodbye to Denmark Strait, and the Atlantic lies ahead of us. Tell me your opinion. Do you think there is anything to stop us?" Lindemann hesitated to speak. He did not want to appear too optimistic. "Tell me, Captain, please," persisted Lutyens. "Unless the British moved instantly to the right place without wasting an hour, the Atlantic should be open to us, sir." "Then we'll give the Suffolk the slip. There won't be a convoy that dare move between America and England," said Lutyens triumphantly. A telephone squawked beside him, and an officer sprang to it. "Bridge," he said, and listened to the message before announcing it loudly. "Smoke on the port bow." As everyone else swung to look, he continued to relay the messages. "Ship on the port bow. 2 ships on the port bow. Closing fast." Battery of binoculars were trained in that direction. "Sound the alarm," said Lutyens. The bellowing warning brought the whole ship's company to their feet and to their stations. Signal Eugen to take station astern, snapped Lutyens. Captain, open fire as soon as they're in range. They're coming right at us, said Lindemann. They mean to fight. Might be better for them if they turn to give us their broadsides, answered Lutyens. Telephones were squawking still. All turrets manned and ready, answered the officer of the watch. Turrets training. They could see that from the bridge. The huge guns swinging round to point over the port bow. Remember what I said, Captain. We must be ready to blow any enemy out of the water at any minute. And here we are, said Lutyens, binoculars to his eyes. Those aren't cruisers, said Lindemann. Look, they're coming round. That's the Hood. That's a battleship with her. His last words were cut off short by the roar of the first salvo from Bismarck's guns. Hit her, hit her. Keep on hitting her, said Lutyens. The gun smoke swirled round him. In the operations room of the Hood, the navigating officer was bent over his chart again. The one with the conspicuous black cross mark to the south of Denmark Strait. There we are, sir. We ought to sight them during the next 5 minutes. We must be closing them fast. Not long to wait now, said the Admiral. Guns loaded, sir, said another voice. Down in the turret, the guns' crews were waiting beside the guns. Nobby was there, one of the guns' crews. He was standing ready. Can't be long now, said the man beside Nobby. Now we do our stuff, said Nobby. Now it's our turn. Enemy in sight, said the officer commanding the turret. Stand by. Turret's training, said Nobby, feeling the turret turn while the ship still heaved and rolled on the heavy sea. The men exchanged glances. There were plenty of men among them who had not yet experienced action, who had never heard their guns fire at an enemy, who had never before waited, as they were waiting now, for an enemy's deadly shells to come winging over the waves to crash against or through the armor beside them. It was a nervous little interval. Those few seconds when everything was ready, when drill had carried them through to this moment, without time to think until now. Thoughts could make prodigious leaps in a few seconds. Back to memories of home in England. Forward to vague, almost unimaginable horrors. Wish we'd start, said somebody. Somebody else was drumming with his fingers on the breech block in front of him. Keep your minds on your work, snapped the gun captain. Then the guns went off with a crash, and the long practice drill began. As the breeches swung open, the new shells came up, were rammed in, were followed to the charges, which were rammed in behind them, and the breeches slammed shut again. Right gun ready. Left gun ready. Another salvo went off. The men bent to their work with frantic energy. A crash and a flash in the turret made them all stagger. They hit us! Who cares, said Nobby. Come on! The next shells were rammed home as smoke came swirling into the turret. The sea was boiling with splashes as the tall pillars of water rose up round the embattled ships. Funnel, smoke, and gun smoke swirled over the heavy grey surface. The eye could travel across to the Bismarck, rolling deeply in the swell, and the imagination could penetrate through her armored side to the shell room of the forward turrets. Here, a small team of German sailors was at work, jerkily, putting the huge shells into the hoist, standing by for a moment, then sending them up and instantly addressing themselves to the next. A bearded German petty officer was standing to supervise. Beside him was one of the very young supernumerary officers. The petty officer was speaking, his speech punctuated by pauses as he checked the positioning of the shells in the hoist, and by the constant accompaniment of the thunder of the salvos far overhead. This is our turn, sir, you see, he said. Me and my men here. They can make all the plans they like in Berlin. Admiral Raeder can look at his charts, and Admiral Lutyens up on the bridge can make his plans, and Captain Lindemann can issue his orders, but it's the guns that do the work. And if we down here don't keep the shells going up, the guns can't fire, and the Admiral might as well be back at home. You see how it is, sir? There was a brief pause as he corrected the placing of one of the shells. Up you go, my beauty, he said. He blew a kiss to the shell as it vanished upward from sight. It slid into the ring, swung round, rose up into the turret, and was seized by the rammer and thrust into the breech of the gun with the turret's sweating crew grouped around it. The charge followed it, and then the guns went off with a crash. Lutyens on the bridge, watching through his glasses, said, "That's a hit! Look! Look!" An enormous pillar of smoke arose from the Hood. Lindemann, through his glasses, saw it too. First there was the silhouette of the ship, sharp and clear now that she had emerged entirely from the mist. Then from somewhere just forward of the funnel came a jet of thick grey smoke. But before this had finished its course, before it had begun to mushroom out, a dozen other jets of smoke, each larger than the first, burst from the ship, expanding so that close above the ship they united, still soaring upwards and still expanding to form a dense cloud hanging over the ship from a great height, attached to it by a vague and slender stalk. It was in that moment that Lindemann, through his excellent binoculars, believed he could see great fragments of the ship soaring upwards to the cloud, and he was nearly sure that he saw bow and stern of the ship rise up out of the water, and the waist sink, as though a wanton child had seized a bathtub toy and snapped it across the middle. It was only for that moment that Lindemann saw this. The broken-backed toy was instantly engulfed in further smoke, pouring from every aperture of the ship, lying low on the surface so that there was nothing to be seen except the few brief splashes as the high-tossed fragments of masts and decks and armor plate came arrowing back into the sea. And when this lower pall of smoke lifted and thinned, there was nothing to be seen. Nothing. And of Nobby and his friends in the turret, there was nothing. One moment they had been hard at work, bending and heaving in the hard, harsh light of the electric lamps. They were boxed up in their little room, separated from the world around them and above them by armor plate of steel a foot thick. Below them, the deep sea. Below them, the magazine and shell room and 300 tons of high explosive. For one moment, it had been thus. The next, and the shell which Bismarck had sent hurtling towards them had crashed its way through half a dozen decks, half a dozen bulkheads, through the chink in Hood's armor, along the narrow, unguarded route to the magazine below the turret, there to burst among those 300 tons of high explosives. And in that second, Nobby and his friends passed, without a chance of knowing it, from existence to annihilation. In the war room, the tension was enormous. If Hood's where we think she is, they'll be making contact any moment, he said. Daylight's just beginning in Denmark State. Now, where's Bismarck? Asked the Air Vice Marshal. By Suffolk's last report 10 minutes ago, she was here. The Rear Admiral pointed to the spot on the chart where the two courses marked in crayon intersected. He drew a black cross there. Signal from Suffolk, sir, said a young officer at a voice pipe at the table where the message had arrived. Most immediate signal. Have sighted Hood and Prince of Wales bearing southeast. Distance 15 miles, course southwest. They've done it. They've got 'em. There was excitement and exhilaration throughout the war room. 2 minutes more, and they'll sight the Bismarck, said the Rear Admiral. That's right. The last words were called forth by a sight of the messages already spoken down the voice pipe, now delivered by a pneumatic tube. The Rear Admiral hardly glanced at it. Most immediate signal from Suffolk, announced the officer at the voice pipe. Hood and Bismarck opening fire. Hood's course approximately southwest. Hood's closing in on her, said the Rear Admiral. Once more, he paid almost no attention to the written signal handed him. Most immediate signal from Suffolk, coming through, said the young officer. He was clearly pretending not to be excited. He was making a show of iron calm. And in that moment, all his calm disappeared. He seemed to wilt. What's that? Repeat that, he said at the voice pipe, doing nothing for a moment. Get on with your job, man, snapped the Rear Admiral. The young officer turned a face of tragedy towards him. Hood's blown up. What? At this moment, the written message rattled down the tube. A dozen hands reached for it, and the Rear Admiral tore it from the container. Hood blown up, he said. Hood blown up? But what? What? Stammered the Air Vice Marshal. The Rear Admiral had only a look for him. All round, there were people standing as if turned to stone. The Rear Admiral rallied. "Go back to your duties," he snapped. "We've more to do." Another message was being spoken down the voice pipe, and the young officer braced himself to hear. "Most immediate signal from Suffolk," he announced in a curious parody of his earlier tone. "Hood sunk. Prince of Wales and Bismarck exchanging fire. Perhaps Prince of Wales will do Hood's business for her," said the Air Vice Marshal to an unresponsive audience. "Most immediate message from Suffolk," announced the young officer. "Prince of Wales heavily hit. Prince of Wales on fire forward. Prince of Wales withdrawing from action behind smoke screen." "Prince of Wales beaten," said the Rear Admiral in a voice devoid of expression. When the message was given him, he stood holding it without a glance. Another officer at the table intervened at this moment. "Wireless interception speaking, sir. Powerful signals in German code originating in Denmark Strait. Bismarck calling Berlin, sir." "They'll be telling the world," said the Rear Admiral. "Oh, God. They'll be telling the world." On the bridge of the Bismarck, Lütjens and Lindemann were looking through their binoculars with the guns bellowing below them. On the horizon lay the pall of smoke which marked the end of the Hood. Not far from it was the silhouette of the Prince of Wales, almost masked with smoke and shell flashes. "Battleship's turning away," said Lütjens. "More smoke. Yes, she's making smoke. She's running." The guns fell suddenly silent, and a staff officer at a telephone reported formally, "Range obscured." Simultaneously, Lütjens and Lindemann took their glasses from their eyes and faced each other. "This is victory, sir," said Lindemann. "A crushing, decisive victory for which your name will always be remembered. It is my proud privilege to be the first to congratulate you." They shook hands. The rest of the staff were standing by with exultation on their faces. "Thank you, Captain," said Lütjens. Even while his right hand was still being clasped, he was gesturing to his chief of staff with his left. "Send this news to Berlin at once," he said. "See that it gets off instantly." "Aye, aye, sir." In the broadcasting station in Berlin, an announcer, script in hand, stood at the microphone. A gesture from the controller behind the window, a trumpeter put his instrument to his lips and blew a long, triumphant fanfare. "Citizens of the Reich," began the announcer, "we interrupt our program to bring you marvelous news. Our ships in the Atlantic have won a marvelous victory. Our Reich Navy is triumphant at sea. The proud British battlecruiser Hood has been blown to atoms, has been sunk with all hands under the guns of our naval forces. The rest of the British Navy has turned and fled, hiding themselves behind a smoke screen from the vengeance of the Reich. Another British battleship has been hit over and over again, and by this time she has probably gone down to join the Hood in the icy waters of Denmark Strait. 10,000 British soldiers have paid the price of obedience to the warmongering Churchill and his Jewish clique. Let us all join in heartfelt congratulations to our Führer, who made this possible. One people, one state, one Führer." All over Germany, the news was broadcast. In the British Ministry of Information, telephones were ringing. "Berlin's got the news on the air already. Hurry up with that announcement. Better to hear it from us than from them. Hurry up with it. Not easy to write a bulletin about defeat. Give the facts, man. They've got to hear about it, and they can take it." In the factories, light music coming over the wireless ended abruptly, and a calm BBC voice made itself heard. "The Admiralty regrets to announce the loss with all hands of HMS Hood this morning as a result of enemy action in Denmark Strait. Further action is imminent." In the bombed-out streets of Portsmouth, an elderly mother was walking with her shopping bag. She stopped when she saw a newspaper seller beginning to write up a headline on his contents bill. "H-O-O-D," he began, and then went on. "S-U-N-K. The woman stood staring and horrified for some seconds, the tears beginning to run down her cheeks. She turned away, bowed with sorrow. She had not far to go with her shopping bag. Round the corner where the heap of rubble marked where 2 houses had once stood, along to her little house with the boards replacing its shattered windows. She entered and put down her bag. There was a framed photograph on the table of someone in a seaman's uniform, and she sat down there where she could see it, dark though the room was, with its boarded-up windows. Her old woman's face was disfiguring itself, was growing shapeless with the emotions within her. Her wizened form seemed to shrink still further as she folded down upon herself. "Oh, Nobby, Nobby," she said. Now her face was down upon her skinny knees, and her narrow back shook with sobs. The New York newspapers carried vast headlines. "Bismarck sinks Hood. World's biggest battlecruiser blown up." In a New York building, a news commentator was explaining to his audience what had happened. It's quite obvious that the Bismarck was on her way to break out into the Atlantic, and the British tried to stop her. And it's also obvious that the British have suffered a stunning defeat. The Hood has blown up. That means the loss of an important ship and a great many lives. The dead will number 1,000 at least, perhaps 2,000. The British have suffered a very serious disaster. And the question is, what happens next? The Bismarck now has complete freedom of action. The British make no claim to having damaged her in the least. She can come south into the Atlantic and smash the British convoys. No convoy escort could stand up to her for one moment. My information is that now that the Hood's gone, there is no British battleship to compare with the Bismarck in any way for speed or size or fighting power. The damage she may do is quite incalculable. Lindemann and Lutjens were looking at the chart in the Bismarck. "We could go back, sir," said Lindemann. "They'd never intercept us." "Why should we go back? Think of the possibilities before us in the Atlantic. Are we going to turn back and waste them?" "But the British, sir. I doubt if the British can lift a finger against us for days to come. Forward! We'll shake that British cruiser off, and then we'll be free. Think of those convoys, Captain." "I shall think about them, sir." "Well, Commander, what's the damage?" The executive officer had arrived and saluted, waiting to make a report. "We were hit by one shell, Captain, at number 46 station, port side." "Where's that?" demanded the Admiral. "Forward, sir." "It's over number 2 oil fuel tank. With the tank full, I cannot yet investigate the damage, except that I can say for certain that it's only slight, very slight indeed." "And that's all the damage?" asked the Admiral. "Yes, sir. But the fuel tank is leaking. We're leaving a little oil behind us. The tank is being pumped out and the fuel transferred at this moment, sir." "Then we need not give it another thought," said the Admiral. "No, sir," said the commander, and hesitated. "Except that the fuel has been contaminated with seawater. We had 200 tons less fuel than we thought we had." "I understand," said the Admiral. "There's still plenty of time to go back, sir," suggested Lindemann. "I understand that, too," said the Admiral. "Thank you, Commander." Lutjens and Lindemann stood staring at the map. 200 tons less oil, said Lindemann, and that's a permanent loss, sir, while we stay at sea. When we meet our tankers, it will be 200 tons less that we shall be able to take on board. "Yes," said Lutjens, still thinking deeply. His forefinger was sweeping out arcs on the chart. He talked more to himself than to Lindemann. "The decision I have to take, the next words I say, can change the history of the world, can decide the fates of nations, can settle the destiny of Germany and of National Socialism and of our Führer. 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 lives can be cut short by my next order. That is so, sir. Forward or back. This is the last moment in which to choose. No changing of minds after this. I've given you my opinion, sir. No, said Richard suddenly. I shall go forward. We haven't fought our way out into the Atlantic just to go back again tamely. Forward. We shall have to turn aside into Brest. 2 days there and the damage can be repaired. Then, with the Scharnhorst and the Neisen, I shall sail out again at the head of a squadron incomparable for power and speed. Very well, sir. Maintain our present course for today until we've shaken off that cruiser. Then we can shape a course for Brest. I don't think the British will guess what we intend. Very well, sir. In the war room at the Admiralty, a group of officers, including the Admiral, the Rear Admiral, and the Air Vice Marshal, were standing by the chart. Signal from Suffolk, sir, said a young officer, reading aloud. Bismarck still heading southwest, speed 25 knots. Bismarck losing oil and leaving a broad trail of oil behind her. She was hit then, said the Rear Admiral. She's still doing 25 knots all the same, said the Admiral. Some small leak in an oil-fueled tank. What's the last weather report? Foul as usual, said the Air Vice Marshal. Clouded 1,000 feet. Heavy banks of fog. Wind, force 5. Heavy swell. Every chance of the Suffolk losing her then. Can your fellows help? As far as we can, sir. She's getting pretty far from Iceland, I'm afraid. An officer approached the chart to change the position of the home fleet on it. Toby's there with the home fleet, said the Admiral. Well, if Bismarck holds her course, every ship we have must move to cut her off. There's Rodney. Let her leave her convoy and take up a course to intercept. Ramillies, she can leave her convoy too. Cable to Nova Scotia and have a revenge leave as soon as she can get upstream. Call in London and Edinburgh from their convoys and send them north as well. And Force H. Draft the orders at once. In the Suffolk, the scene was very similar to the earlier one before the tragedy of the Hood. She was still steaming hard over the misty water, sliding out of one fog bank for a few brief minutes before sliding into another. The lookouts were still at their stations, the exposed ones still pelted with spray, still turning steadily with their binoculars as they swept the sea all around the ship. Ship bearing green 5, yelled one of the forward lookouts suddenly. There was the Bismarck, bows on, heading out of the mist, straight for them. Down the voice pipe above the head of the quartermaster at the wheel came the sharp order, hard aport. Instantly the quartermaster swung the wheel round, feeling the heel of the ship as she turned, watching the compass move steadily over the card. Down in the boiler room, the telegraphs rang for full speed, and a clattering indicator said, "Make smoke." The maneuvering valves were feverishly turned as the ship heeled. A stoker opened the valve to make smoke, and, peering through the peephole, saw the white-hot flames roaring behind it become thick and black.